Getting ready.
Should be to bring up the email. Not very big.
Okay, just kidding.
I didn't say hello.
For sure.
You did say hello.
I did briefly,
And I
right?
didn't say hello back, sorry.
Oh, that's, no, I think you did.
Yeah, for sure.
Wish I could blame Bailey to save me Sunday. She was struggling. Insufficient caffeine.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome.
Perfect timing, Ryan. Perfect timing. Okay. Should we wait for Anne? Is Anne coming?
Yes, she is on her way.
Oh, she's on her way.
Yeah, she's on her way. She messaged me like 20 minutes ago that she should be here soon.
Oh, okay. Shall we just get started though,
Yeah,
probably?
if you like.
All right. Welcome everybody to the March 13th meeting of the San Jose Climate Advisory Commission. I'm glad to see you all here. And we have an absolutely crammed agenda tonight. So if you hear me encouraging us all to move on, that's why. And and I think that Anne, I'll try to listen acutely. My audio is coming with Anne probably. And so I might ask you to speak, I'll speak loudly, if nothing else for my sake. So I would like to call the meeting to order. And will you go ahead and do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Maddie McKelly? Thank you. Bill DeVincenzi?
Here.
Thank you. Glenn Garfunkel?
Here.
Thank you. Ryan Lodico?
Here.
Lucia Marquez? Okay. Ruth Merino?
Here.
Karen Nelson?
Here.
Victor Neumeier?
Here.
Philip Remaker?
Here.
And Tracy Wayne? Here. Thank you.
Great. So we do have a quorum present. And so we have right now, apparently Lucia and is absent, otherwise just Lucia, okay. Now, the orders of the day, of course, need to be verified, and that's this meeting's agenda. So, we have Lucia here. Welcome.
We have the agenda at all?
Yes.
Yeah, please, let us have an agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any, you all have looked at the agenda, are there any additional agenda items that you did not see and that need to be added to the agenda? No, great.
Just one clarification that the last, could you scroll down, Leticia? So, and under new business, so I screwed up. So item A under new business and item E are the same item.
Oh, really?
So, yes. So
Oh, okay.
Kip is gonna talk, you mean just a second?
Different presentations, but the same.
No, it's the one
Same?
presentation.
Really? Okay.
And we'll, we'll take it as far, anyway.
Okay.
Good to know. Just found that out.
All right, okay, A and B are together, all right. Anything else?
I'm sorry, A and
A and B?
E.
E, oh, A and
Eric.
E, thank you.
E, Eric.
See, I need.
I was late too.
Thank you, okay, A and E are together,
Wait a minute,
all right, thanks.
I only need one.
Okay, that makes more sense, thanks. Any other changes to the agenda? Okay. I think we can probably just call for an acceptance of the orders of the day, the meeting's agenda. I think the two attachments are modestly, insignificantly different. So is there a motion to accept the orders of the day?
I move to accept. I move.
And a second? Second. There's a second. All say aye. And nay? Okay, it's approved unanimously. Oh, my goodness. I'll get that. All right, so, is there, anything that we should know about for the public record? If not, we will move on to the open forum and do we have members of the public here in attendance today?
Yes, I'm a member.
Right, and so a couple members of the public, is there anything that you would like to discuss that's outside the agenda items at this point? So we're good, okay, great, fantastic, then we will move on to the consent calendar, which are the minutes from January 9th. Are there any corrections to those minutes? If there are no corrections, then I think I can just say, I'll just ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve? Bill makes a motion to approve. A second? And Manny seconds. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? So I guess we have a couple people who are abstaining, or did you say aye? Aye?
I was there for half the meeting. I don't want
Oh.
to violate any fiduciary.
I see. Well, we'll just say the motion was approved. We'll leave it at that. Okay. Now, we do have under the reports information only section, we have the Climate Smart 6-month look ahead, which is your attachment A. Would you all just go ahead and go there? And I presume you've all had a chance to at least glance at it. Are there any questions, any thoughts, any comments on the 6-month look ahead for the commission? As I recall, in one of our previous meetings, we did have some discussion. But does it all look good? I'll give you a minute or two.
So why wouldn't our next meeting be on there?
I don't think this is for the commission meetings per se, but rather for things that are coming up on various meetings of import for the commission. So it's informational related as opposed to subject matter for the meetings.
You certainly can add the meetings if that's helpful, and we can set them off
Would you like
different
to do
color or
that?
something.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that will be, okay, thanks, Zach. So for the next meeting, you guys will do that, staff will do that. And I don't think we need a motion for that. I think we just know that we're doing that. Okay. Well, moving along very quickly, we're in new business. The first order of business, item on the agenda is the cooperation agreement between Pacific Gas and Electric Company and the City of San Jose. And Kip is going to be talking about that.
Hi,
Kip,
good evening,
hi, there you
everyone.
are. Hi.
I'm super excited to be here tonight. I have Kip Harkness. I'm Deputy City Manager for the City of San Jose. I'm responsible for the city's infrastructure, utilities, and emergency management function, including all of our work around climate, both on mitigation and adaptation. I have been to literally over 1,000 community meetings or commission meetings in my work with the city. And part of the reason I'm excited tonight is this is both my first time here with you all, and this is my last community meeting with the City of San Jose. I'll be retiring in about 2 weeks. But I've had the privilege of working for you all and with you all for a very long time. And I think that the work that you do around climate change and adaptation is one of the most important challenges facing our generation. It's actually why I asked to have the portfolio that I have after having run our emergency management, our IT, Parks and Recs, and other things. It's the question of our time. So I want to, I do want to not be too nostalgic about things, but I do want to say one thing. I used to remember that I used to bring my daughter with me to these to various meetings. And at one meeting, I had her, it was a community meeting, and kind of had to leave her in the back. And at one point, she started passing out money from my wallet and my credit card. You don't get that tonight, because two things.
How old was she?
My daughter is 25 now. She was 4 then, and she's on halfway through a 20-day voyage down the Colorado River rafting. So no, my credit cards and wallet will not be passed out tonight unless somebody pickpockets. So
You raised a giving person.
yeah, she is. So thank you for indulging me. I really am kind of a little bit verklempt about this being the last one. I want to talk to you a little bit about the cooperation agreement. I see also the study session is on the agenda, and so I'll share a few things and notions about that as well. So next slide, please. Oops. Yeah. So there we go. So at a top level, the cooperation agreement is like an MOU. It's non-binding, but it sets a framework for our future cooperation with Pacific Gas and Electric, which, as you know, provides the distribution infrastructure for the city of San Jose when it comes to electricity, and that we, for at least from about 99% of folks, provide the actual electrons that go through that. At a top level, the focus of the cooperation agreement is really around infrastructure development and addressing deficiencies in electrical infrastructure, especially for large load customers. Those are the big customers that are using a lot of energy, but also for what PG&E calls the heartbeat customers. You and me, as we're trying to swap out maybe an old gas furnace for an electric heat pump. We see capturing some of these large load customers as really critical for the economy and the fiscal health of the city, as well as part of meeting our decarbonization goals. We need to green the grid, and we need to have a grid that can handle the transmission going back and forth in all sorts of different directions. And then we've set ourselves up to drive delivery with PG&E, because PG&E, I would say, everything I would say here, I would say if PG&E was in the room, we have had a fraught relationship with them, and they haven't always been able to deliver on what they've said. So we want to create a process that allows us to get those interconnections of electric utility, large and small, going. So next slide, please. A little bit of background. Some of this is fairly obvious, but I think the first one is really part of what's really pressing us now. There is a tremendous growing need for electricity here in Silicon Valley, across the region, across the nation. Some of that is the very good work of us going away from alternatives that are worse for the environment and becoming more electrical. But a lot of it is also this interesting stair step of, gosh, we got these phones that are now 5G. We use a lot of data, right? Oh, we watch a bunch of movies now on demand. Oh, I do immersive video games, right? And with one beautiful sound, cryptocurrency, and now AI, right? And so our apparently insatiable appetite for cat videos, artificially intelligent generated, is one of the things that is having this increasing demand. And we're in a bit of what I call a magic moment here in Silicon Valley. A lot of the people who do the research on AI and who do research on information thinking are right here in this valley. And they need to have close access to data centers and compute power to do what they need. So we're seeing a huge, unprecedented demand for electrical hookups. Again, we also have these very powerful decarbonization goals, which are must-haves for us in terms of meeting our climate obligations.
I can't turn the phone off. I am so sorry.
It's okay, it happens.
I simply can't get it off.
Sorry, maybe.
I always have trouble with this phone. Sorry, Kip.
No worries, thanks for the tech help with her.
Yeah, there you go.
And as I mentioned, we've had infrastructure challenges. We've had
almost
hospitals that haven't been
turn
able
off. I've tried it several
to get open because
just
the
gonna keep
interconnection
running.
lagged. With their own emergency operations center, we had to delay the opening for
that's
several
fine.
months because of interconnection. And in particular, in North San Jose and downtown, we're worried about that interfering with the pace of development that we're making. And then, of course, we have this critical need for clean and reliable clean energy. So PG&E's role, why work with PG&E? It's fairly obvious. They own the distribution infrastructure. And in any case, even if we end up setting up our own municipal electric utility, they're still going to own 99% of that distribution infrastructure. Now, the city of San Francisco and others have talked about buying out PG&E's infrastructure at scale, billions of dollars. We don't have the appetite or the interest in doing that and inheriting all of their existing equipment and having to manage that. So the the direction that we've been given and the direction we're taking is to be collaborative with them as they try to transform themselves. Next thing, next slide. So this is just to show that we've had these sort of two parallel paths. One, we began working with PG&E really back in 2017 when they started doing the power safety shutoffs. But around 2021, we started to see an improvement and a shift with them, principally around emergency management. We went from having a knife fight with them during the power safety shutoffs to then actively collaborating and then being proactive partners. And since then, we've established regular meetings to try to improve a whole host of things with them, including the emergency response, electrical connection, innovation, planning for the distribution infrastructure, and load forecasting. This last one is really important to us because, again, we supply the electrons. If we don't know when they're coming or where they're coming, it's hard for us to buy those and get those online. In parallel, we've been directed to explore this idea of becoming a municipal electric utility. It's a very interesting proposition where we could potentially, for a limited area of the city, deliver the distribution infrastructure potentially at lower costs than PG&E and potentially in a more innovative way. So we've been exploring that actually prior to this, but really, especially in 2023, October, got a very clear mandate from council to deeply explore this. And frankly, that sparked the interest of PG&E in coming to the table with a bit more aggressive of a proposal. And I'll say, I've been trained in negotiations, believe in the kind of getting to yes theory. One of the things that they say in negotiations is you always want to understand what's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If what I want to do doesn't happen, what's my BATNA? And what PG&E effectively did is that the BATNA with PG&E was kind of down here, and it got better and better and better as they began talking to us. So next piece. What does this cooperation agreement say? Well, again, it's non-binding, and it needs to be followed with a subsequent implementation agreement. But the basic pieces are we're going to fund the city team to accelerate work and improve coordination. That would mean not just waiting for customers to come to us, but going out and talking to them about what their needs are in advance. And that would mean when PG&E and other developers get into the building, we don't sort of randomly assign them somebody in Public Works. They would have a dedicated team who actually had subject matter expertise to help them from the concept to the build to the inspection. And that funding would be on the PG&E side and come out of their profits or come out of their fees, but not be placed on the taxpayers. The joint planning and exploring options for financing and developing new infrastructure, very important to us, both because we have to buy the electrons, but also as we look at development, we really need to know where the electricity is going to be available when. So for example, downtown, there's some key substations where we haven't understood what their plans are and when they're going to rebuild them. One of them is critical to the future of Dearborn Station. This says, no, we want to be right there in the room with you, understanding when you're going to do that, how that's going to happen. And then finally, this one, commitment to define milestones for interconnection of large load customers. It's one thing to say something, it's another thing to do it. We believe in using what I call objectives as measured by key results and setting out clear measurable milestones that in the subsequent agreement, they will be held accountable for. Process improvement, speed and delivery on both sides. At this point, it's a little bit of what my dad would call throwing it over the gunnel. You kind of do your stuff over here and throw it over and hope the other person catches it, and then they kind of do their thing, or maybe they walk away from it. You don't know, you can't see. And then at some point, a couple of 100 days later, they throw it over, and you're like, oh no, this isn't what I need. So trying to create a common single system that we're working on together, so that things like joint trenching agreements, for example, that rather than waiting for a developer to come with us and say, hey, we need a joint trenching agreement, which you do for any large load interconnection, anticipate that and have a simpler process that you work on together. Again, and this relates to these process improvements around the speed of delivery and innovation design. And some of the innovations in design are making sure that as we build out the infrastructure, that the restrictions in PG&E's Green Book, which govern what can be built and can't, might need to be modified to take into account innovations in electrical distribution, different ways that data centers do work, and different ways that they might use alternative power sources. Finally, a lot of these jobs are great pathways to prosperity. If you have a son or a daughter or a niece or a nephew or a nibbling of some sort who is not necessarily all that keen to be in an office all the time, there are a lot of fantastic jobs that involve electricity out there in the field, building it, maintaining it, operating it, that are very high paying, very complex, and very rewarding. And so we want to develop a pipeline for people here in this valley and in the city that can take access and make access to those jobs. Yes, ma'am.
Kip, going back to process improvements.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you done enough research around PG&E's orientation to process improvements? And can you see demonstrated examples of their willingness to really look at process improvement in a really open way?
It's a very excellent question, and I think I know where you're coming from, because that's certainly where I've been coming from. The good news answer is yes, and I'll give you two concrete examples that make me hopeful. One is in the area of emergency management, which I've mentioned. They've gone from not sharing data with us, for example, on their medical baseline customers. A medical baseline customer is somebody who has a medical device that requires electricity 24/7. And when it goes out, that person is in a bad situation. When we have a power outage because of a flood or because of anything else, or we want to know where those folks are. Used to be they wouldn't share that with us. Now they proactively share that with us and allow us to know which ones they've been able to reach out to, and ones they haven't been able to, they'll actually ask us to help. We'll send a police officer or fire out there and be able to check on those folks. That's one example of some of the process improvements. The other thing that they did is they actually on their nickel had Stanford's design school come out. And they did this truly radical thing, and I'm sort of joking, but not. They had us and them sit down in the same room. They brought in customers and had PG&E and us listen to customers. It was really powerful. And it's anybody who does this sort of stuff saying like, well, duh, that's where you start. But to see them really listening to the customer pain points and understanding that. And after one session, I saw PG&E kind of mid-manager walk into the corner and he was like this. I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? And he's like, no, I'm okay. But what they said was so painful, right? And so true. And so I'm not saying we can take it to the bank, but you've got a higher level of commitment to change than I've seen. And the other thing that makes me optimistic is I always think about, does the person need to do this change because they want to do this change or because they have to do this change? PG&E has been bankrupt how many times? At least two in my time here, right? The only way they're going to avoid a third bankruptcy is if they figure some of these things out, especially with the large load customers. So in addition to the fact that I feel like I've seen good people trying to do good work, perhaps the most encouraging sign is that those who are motivated by money need to make this change happen at PG&E or they're going to miss the boat. So again, I'm not sold yet until I see the numbers in the demonstration, but I think we have a chance of making them change. That said, you know, we have to fight with them tooth and nail on some of the stuff around clean energy still. So let's move forward. So we're negotiating a implementation agreement. Next slide, please. In parallel, we've also made sure we've stayed in communication with IBEW. This is the union which represents the electrical workers. Even though it's a brotherhood, it's both male and female electrical workers. They have been actually very useful in helping us understand some of the risks and complexities in standing up a municipal electric utility, as well as some of the difficulties with transforming PG&E and some of the opportunities for transforming PG&E. I say we've built a strong relationship with them and continue to collaborate with them. They're also very interested in these sort of pathways to prosperity, both for their members and for others. I think this is going to be very important as we think about building electrification, because one of the things that you may have already run into as an individual or as a commission is making sure that we have enough skilled and talented people and businesses who can do the work of electrical conversion, especially at the house-to-house level as we get into complicated things. I have a 1918 bungalow. I'm very proud of it. I love it, but it's got knob and tube wiring and an old gas heater. And when it comes time to conversion, I'm going to need somebody smart to help me do that, right? Do we have enough of those people in this valley that people like me can convert as the time comes? And then finally, what were our recommendations? Next slide. We recommended that they allow us to negotiate and execute the non-binding cooperation agreement and that we begin to negotiate this binding implementation agreement. They passed that direction. With the direction, they had a couple of additions. They had about 7 points they wanted to add into the implementation agreement, making sure we were getting a fair deal. And they also want to make sure they brought some information back to the 21st as we looked at some of the options, including we have about 159 acres of economic development land on North San Jose related to the regional wastewater facility and helping the council understand what role that played in electrification. Long story short, we were able to execute that, this agreement this week. And then for the implementation agreement, we'll bring that to council on the 21st of March, which is the special study session. Let me hop to that very briefly, since that's also on the agenda. The memo and the agenda should be posted on Monday, so you'll have all of the information there. I'm not able to give you a draft, but I'll give you a little bit of a preview. The agenda, if you go back, I don't remember which rules committee it's on. You can find it from the rules committee, but it will be posted on Monday. Basically, we're going to walk council through our journey in exploring the municipal electric utility, as well as our journey in talking with PG&E. And we're going to recommend that we move forward with an implementation agreement with PG&E. We're going to ask that they accept our work on the finding. And then essentially what the recommendation is will be to hold the possibility of a municipal electric utility as a back pocket possibility if PG&E does not move forward on their agreement in a way that meets their obligations. I'll stop there and I'll let you chair and handle questions.
Why don't you go ahead and I'll ask my question after
So
yours.
assuming that they decide, or that a decision is made to move ahead, where's the funding going to come from to fund this infrastructure build-out?
It will come, a lot of it will come from the developers themselves. So in terms of what we're seeing.
The developers, you mean the big users, the ones who need?
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at the major users of data centers in particular, the large load customers which we anticipate are data centers and compute cloud centers, manufacturing and labs related to data centers, and then our other kind of usual suspects of large load customers, housing, other manufacturing, and things like hospitals. But we expect the largest number to be in the first three categories, and those would be the Stacks, NVIDIAs, Microsofts, Googles, Amazons.
AI and that kind of thing?
AI and that kind of thing, yes, sir.
I'll be right with you, Glenn. Just a second. This might be the question might be a little premature, but you meant that there's the developer, there's PG&E, and then there's the city.
Yeah.
When it comes to the role of funding to secure that whatever plans are put in place, we actually get to, completion of implementation.
Yeah.
But let's just say there's a scenario where it turns out that the relationship with PG&E isn't working.
Yeah.
But we're in the middle of the financial effort to implement. What are the plans for how the city will handle that situation when PG&E is actually part of part of the funding structure with the developer and the
Right.
city?
So what we've envisioned is that we would have monthly check-ins with PG&E. Every 6 months, we'd have a formal progress check-in against the objectives as measured by key results. If they are not compliant, we would essentially give them a 6-month cure period because this infrastructure stuff takes a while. If they're not able to meet that, we would have grounds to terminate the agreement if we wanted to and potentially move ahead with a municipal electric utility as the fallback.
But then the funding would fall totally on our shoulders.
Now, the funding for whatever has happened would stay with them. If we were to go forward, I'm getting a little bit ahead of my skis, but I know you guys care about this a lot. So in our analysis of a municipal electric utility, there are a number of ways to start those up. You could go out to the voters and you could get bond funds. You could use general fund. We do not think that is a wise use of bond resources or general fund at this moment in time for the city. We have so many other competing priorities for those things that doesn't feel appropriate. However, we have a strong confidence given the off-the-hook demand for large load interconnection that we could find a private development partner that would finance the initial build-out of the infrastructure for us. And so the idea would be to put the risk on a separate private developer and create a new deal, not to have that either be on PG&E or the city's general fund or a general obligation bond.
Oh, okay, thanks. And Glenn, you had a question?
Yeah, so does the binding agreement supersede the non-binding?
The binding agreement kind of nests under the cooperation agreement. So I think of it as a two level. So the cooperation agreement says, we're going to do all these wonderful things together. And then the binding agreement says, this is actually specifically what we're going to do out of all of these things, how we're going to do them and how we're going to enforce.
What's what are the timeline for the binding?
Yeah, depende, as the Italians say. If we get direction at the 21st, as we have asked, then we've actually been negotiating that in parallel with PG&E right now. Some of that, I'm looking over at the legal team, will depend on how many turns we need to do on that agreement to make sure that we are confident that we have strong protections for our interests. But I sense that that could move relatively quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if we could execute that by April, for example, if we get direction.
Execute meaning,
Execute meaning sign it, not necessarily get anything built in the world.
okay, I understand. I just meant,
Yeah.
you have the signed agreement with PG&E.
Exactly.
That's pretty fast.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and then the other question is, initially, there was some discussion of holding on to some of the plans for the Muni
Yeah,
in parallel.
yeah.
Is that still on the table, or?
Again, going back to my kind of negotiation theory and training is, if you have a credible alternative, you have incentives for the person to stay on target. So what that exactly means, we think we built a reasonable business case that's pretty solid. We want to make sure that we don't do anything to foreclose, at the very least, our opportunity to establish that. One of our biggest aces in the hole, if you will, is the potential to do that on the 159 acres. And since that's at least a couple of years out, that gives us the space to say, worst case scenario, we've got it here. We also have a pretty knowledgeable team in-house who will be retaining, who we could pull together again. So.
I'm a little confused. Like wastewater. Is wastewater a project that PG&E is being offered? Or San Jose is holding on to?
Yeah, I threw a bunch of stuff together. Let me clarify. So on our regional wastewater facility at land, which is owned jointly by San Jose 80% and City of Santa Clara 20%. We have traditionally had a huge buffer area, partly because we smelled and we used a lot of dangerous chemicals. We've shifted the processes as we've been doing a multi-billion-dollar rebuild in the wastewater facility that has resulted in two things. One, a dramatically diminished footprint of what is required to run the facility, including getting rid of approximately 700 acres of drying beds for a 7-acre in-store facility. Dramatic reduction in the odor and a shift away from chlorine gas to other chemicals that aren't essentially toxic on site. Part of the master plan that was adopted for that facility in 2013 said, hey, when you're kind of gotten through some of this and this buffer land is no longer needed in the same way it was, a lot of that should go back to natural uses and the marsh and restoration. And some of that, about 159 acres, should become economic development land. So we have the opportunity to develop that land for economic development. It's in North San Jose. It's entitled for the kinds of uses like heavy industry or data centers that would be large load customers. So we view that as a very strong carrot or stick, if you will, around making sure that PG&E is compliant. If they are the ones developing that, they stand to gain quite a bit by developing that infrastructure. But if we come to a point where the agreement isn't working and we decide we want to stand up a municipal electric utility, that's a near perfect place to do it.
Right. See, so as I understand, you're saying it is being offered to PG&E.
It already is. This is all PG&E's territory right now, so we aren't choosing to take anything away from PG&E's territory. And if we can come to an agreement with the developer that allows us to develop that land, from a city standpoint, it's something that makes sense to us.
And the same applies for the airport.
We're looking at, part of what the PG&E agreement has on critical infrastructure is for them to look with us at increasing resilience and reliability of both the wastewater treatment plant and the airport. So we're hoping that they're going to come to us with some proposals that will allow us to do that. But part of what we've said is that critical infrastructure and powering that is very important to us, and also one of the areas where we might reserve the ability to provide that ourselves. Yeah, these are all really good thoughts, and some of the ones that we've knocked around as well. Please, I'll ask the chair to recognize you.
Ryan, did you have a question?
Yeah, is there a fixed length to this implementation agreement?
Good question. It's a 10-year frame on the implementation agreement, a maximum of 10 years. It's technically a 7-year agreement. The first 5 years, the idea is that the first 5 years are sort of more written out, and then after 7 years you can extend it. And the idea is we'd set some time frames on checking in on various things. But it's a 7 to 10 year agreement is the right way to think about it, unless they don't meet their obligations.
I think what we'd like to do, we've had a lot of great questions, is though to open up the discussion a little bit differently and I think Ruth has some background discussion that she'd like to share with the commissioners and with you, Kip,
Yeah,
as
and I'm
well.
happy to leave and let you do your discussion if I'm intrusive, I'm happy to stay.
I'd rather you stayed. I think that would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Because you can answer any additional questions
I'll do my
if you
best.
can. Okay, yeah, so at our last meeting, I mentioned that the city was gonna hold this March 21st study session on San Jose Power, which is the potential municipal utility that San Jose would have. And so I sent some background information. I don't know if you had time to look at the packet before the meeting. Hopefully you did. I had some information that you could look at. And so basically, I've been following this for many years from like when Kip, and thank you Kip also for excellent presentation, of course. When we had problems before and, even the city wanted to go ahead and take over PG&E when they were bankrupt. That was Mayor San Ricardo, and then we didn't. And then in October of 23, as Kip just mentioned, the city went ahead and, well, let's see. At that time, Ellis Power, correct me, Kip, I don't get these terminologies correct,
You're
but
doing great.
Ellis Power was going to construct the 2 transmission lines?
Yeah, the California Independent System Operator, CAISO, had finally recognized the need for dramatically increased transmission capability in Silicon Valley, both in the north and the south. After a competitive process, Ellis Power was awarded the contract to build and operate a large transmission line in the north, coming in from the north and going over to Santa Clara, and a large transmission line coming up from the south and going through downtown. The original design was 500 megawatts of capacity. Recently in November, that was in mid-cycle quite dramatically, literally doubled overnight to 1,000 by CAISO as they recognize the even growing need. So it is that build out of the transmission line which both recognizes the need and also creates some opportunity for us to potentially tap into that increased transmission capacity as we look at exploring a municipal electric utility.
Right, and so if the city were to distribute the electricity from those, and they would need the municipal utility. The city council did approve revisions to the municipal code to allow for that. So what I wanted to do today, originally, was I was hoping we'd have the memo for the 21st, which is coming out on Monday, but I think Kip has explained it pretty well. So what I mentioned that I wanted to do this time, what I mentioned last time, what I wanted to do was I wanted to have input from the commission to the meeting of the 21st. And so I drafted something, and Kip, I don't know, I assume that the memos have already gone through all their layers of approval, that we couldn't put our input into.
Yeah, no, it'd be too late to have the
that's what I
the
thought.
memo itself change, but it's perfectly appropriate to have that direction or the comments come from you, and we can
As a
take
letter-
those as a formal
as a letter
letter,
to-
and we'll
yeah.
certainly read it and deeply reflect on it before the presentation.
So I went ahead and drafted a letter, and if you could pull it up. Unfortunately, I finished it at like 6:30, and so I didn't have time to print it out, but Leticia, did you email it to the commissioners?
We're gonna go ahead and email to all the commissioners.
Okay, yeah, and then we're gonna put it up, it's kind of long, and what I'd like to do though is have you think about, first of all, do we want to have any input into the meeting next Friday without having looked at the memo? But what we do know is that, and Kip, correct me if I'm wrong, there's gonna be 2 items on that agenda on the 21st. One covers is it the implementation agreement or the collaboration?
The agenda itself is about 5 items. The recommendation, there'll be three recommendations. One is basically to accept the results of the study and the reports that go forward. 2 is to direct us to negotiate and execute the implementation agreement. We only have direction to negotiate it. And 3rd is the provision to have the ability to stand up or resume exploration of the San Jose Power if that implementation agreement isn't successful.
Okay. So it's probably kind of hard for you to see this. Maybe, should I read it or? And then,
I think you almost would have to unless we want to enlarge it.
yeah. And then, like I said, we can, I've drafted something up, and then based on what, Kip has talked about and what the information I had sent you, we could revise this and send it to council, or we don't send anything, or we do something different. But I'll go ahead, oh, that's perfect. So I'll go ahead and go over, it's 2 pages, so it's a little lengthy. And I don't know if you think you have enough time to decide. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read it real quick. We, the City of San Jose's Climate Advisory Commission, write to you regarding the City Council study session regarding SJ Power and the cooperation agreement. In our opinion, a San Jose municipal utility could be used to distribute the electricity in the geographical area served by the new transmission connection that LS Power is in the process of building, and that will allow the City of San Jose to directly receive power. We note that we have not yet read the city manager's memos that will be made public on Monday, and we based our comments on prior memos. We agree with the city's long-term goals of improving reliability and affordability of clean energy infrastructure that is critical to attracting businesses, supporting economic development, and fostering innovation, as described on page 2 of the Deputy City Manager's memo dated February 20th. We believe the best way to achieve the city's goal of affordability is establishment of municipal utility, which would distribute the electricity from the new transmission line to areas that would be only a small part of San Jose's electrical load. That said, we acknowledge the city manager's path to have PG&E distribute the electricity from the new lines as outlined in the manager's memo dated February 20th. The efficient and timely delivery of electrical capacity to San Jose will result in significant revenue gains for the city of San Jose. The formation of the utility is a preferred path to achieve this goal and would result in lower rates for its customers. While we prefer the municipal utility to include the new downtown and North San Jose service areas, we accept the city manager's proposed approach to first allow PG&E to attempt to meet SJ's goals. We reluctantly accept this approach provided that PG&E meets the milestones and performance obligations outlined in both the cooperation agreement and subsequent implementation agreements, and quality service is maintained in the long term even after the initial build-out is completed. And then as Kip said, should PG&E not meet the milestones and performance obligations, the agreements must allow for San Jose to assume municipal control. We also assume that San Jose will not forfeit its allocation of power from LS Power in a way that might hinder our serving North San Jose and downtown should PG&E not meet its obligations. In addition, we agree with this statement from the mayor's memo, and this was presented at the city council along with the cooperation agreement. The mayors and some of the city council members, compliance with the Brown Act wrote, maintaining access to independent delivery source would provide the city with contingency options should PG&E's reliability and cost structure become unsustainable. By maintaining an open pathway with LS Power, San Jose ensures it is not solely dependent on PG&E for delivery. This flexibility strengthens the city's ability, et cetera. And then I went ahead and put in a chart. One of the big things, as you know, is PG&E's rates are way too high. Further down below, I write that they made over $2 billion, in fact, $2.4 billion in profits last year, and that's paid by us, by the residents. And all the municipal utilities have much lower rates, and that could be passed on. And then just thank you. So that's one thing we could say, or we could revise this. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I don't know. And then, people can go ahead and comment on what they think we should do.
Yeah, Glenn.
Yeah, just a couple more related questions for Kip.
Sure.
Do I understand, so I understand you have monthly sort of meetings or checkpoints, but the city can pull out like once every 6 months, depending on, I mean, is that the sort of the scheme of?
Yeah, the thought is we'd have every 6 months meeting. There's some key planning cycles that also corresponds with in terms of electrical planning and infrastructure. And every 6 months would be a formal like, hey, how are we on these green traffic light style? And then we would give them the ability to cure for another 6 months if they were off in a way we felt was significant.
I see.
And so you essentially have
So they
a
have a
lag, but you have every 6 months a check-in with a lagging 6 months. So it would take a year to make sure that we were there, but we'd have that as a continual
Okay,
basis.
second question is, do you expect they'll actually sign?
Yeah, I have a high degree of confidence that should we get direction from city council to move in this direction, that we can come to an agreement that we feel is comfortable. I'm again checking with my lawyers to make sure we're protected in it. Who've been doing a fantastic job on this, by the way. And I think they are highly incentivized to sign. I would also say that I think that we have strongly increased what's in there because of, frankly, pressure from folks like you and others around us pointing out the strong advantages of potentially standing up a municipal electric utility.
I'm kind of curious, do you think PG&E is putting extra resources into San Jose that they're not putting into
Yes.
the rest of the state?
I don't think they would say that necessarily, but essentially what we told them. So I've done transformations in large bureaucracies, and I will say two things about it. They're possible, they're not easy, and they take time. So PG&E has said we can transform the way we're going to do business. And part of what I've said to them, and I was like, that's great. I hope you do that. But that's going to take you 2 to 3 years at best. In the meantime, you might just have to put blood, sweat, and tears and money in here to make sure it works. And they said, we will commit the resources we need to be successful. And basically what I told them, ... if that means something doesn't happen in fill in the blank here, another country's, another service area, I don't really care. I want to make sure that we get the resources we need to make this happen. So they understand that they're going to need to appropriately resource this, and it's going to be more than what they've been doing in the past, is the way I would say it.
I'm sort of curious, what's in it for them?
There's
And by that I mean,
Yeah.
I think you probably know what I mean, but they're going the extra 3 miles. Why would they go the extra 3 miles for this project when they're not doing it elsewhere?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I love this sort of. I like to play cards face up, right, to understand what the game mechanics are. So I think of it this way: there are probably 3 things that are highly motivating to them. One is this is where the money is. So if you look at electric utilities across North America, many of them are betting their future on being able to attract these large load customers. Because once you build out, let's say a 99 megawatt data center, I build a 99 megawatt data center that's 15 feet from a transmission line, all brand new equipment, all under warranty, practically zero fire risk, right? I have a cash cow that is just paying me for the next 20 or 30 years, that I have one customer that I have to bill for who is probably not going to give me any trouble. It is the perfect way to finance a utility. 2, they are scared of municipal electric utilities eating their lunch. Why are all the data centers in Santa Clara? And they don't happen to love Santa Clara. They love the rates. Why does Santa Clara have better parks than we do? They're not smarter over there in the city government. They have more money to spend on parks and community centers because they have the money that comes in from a data center. A large load customer, the utility user tax for a data center and the business tax, property tax, leave the business tax aside, we don't really have a business tax. Property tax on secured and unsecured property for a 99 megawatt data center, low end is $3.4 million a year. Reasonably $7 million a year into the general fund with practically zero expenses for police, fire, libraries, or parks for the 40 people who are there. So the other thing PG&E is scared of is if more and more people go this way, their lunch gets eaten whole here, whole there. And that's a very real threat to their bottom line because we're also creaming off the easy customers. If I live in, I'll pick on Erica who works on this with me. If I live in the mountains of Santa Cruz up in my hippie farm, and I've got PG&E infrastructure, it's subject to wildfire. I'm 1,000 feet from the road and I got to string this long line through this. It's very expensive and costly and difficult to maintain aging infrastructure servicing people who are spread out over a long area. It's very cheap to use brand new infrastructure to go from a transmission line to a data center. So not only is it getting a customer, it's getting exactly the customers that they need. And so it's a visceral threat to their bottom line.
So does that mean, and this might be more of a question for Zach, and forgive me if I'm being sort of, I should know this, but so if the city follows through with PG&E, then that means we don't need San Jose Power. And that means that if we go with this plan, that PG&E will be billing these customers as opposed to San Jose Clean Energy.
So let's distinguish between the transmission, where the electrons come from, and the distribution and transmission. Every data center that is built out and has distribution infrastructure that's served by PG&E, the default electrons will be coming from San Jose Clean Energy.
Okay.
The question is, should we get into the distribution business as a municipal electric utility? And so part of the reason that we can live with PG&E is if they do their job well and their boat floats, our boat floats as well. And they have, not only by law do they have to be neutral on us being the provider, but they've doubled that down, that they're not going to
So
try to poach
they get their
us.
money from the distribution side of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, can I ask a question? I'm just the public, but do you trust them? Because
Well, I'm going to quote
all I'm
somebody I
gonna
normally
say.
don't necessarily quote on this, Ronald Reagan, right? Trust but verify, right? I think that part of what I've seen is I've seen some people on PG&E who are absolutely committed to transformation, including Patty Poppy, the CEO, partly because she needs to. But you can take that as far as I can throw a Volkswagen. What I want to be able to do is I want to be able to demonstrate whether or not they're working, and I want it to be agnostic of trust of whether we do this. I want this to be built into an agreement that is based on, do you deliver or not? But to this point, I wouldn't be entering into this if I didn't think there was at least a reasonable probability on them, A, wanting to do this and being able to do this.
Question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I didn't understand Ellis Power is going into Santa Clara. So Ellis Power goes into Santa Clara, PG&E develops San Jose. Are we going to be at a price disadvantage? Or sorry, are the data centers going to be at a price disadvantage relative to Santa Clara?
Yeah, so Santa Clara is always going to have the advantage of price. They will have some increased capacity, but what we're hearing for the first time that I've been listening to, and Zach knows this a lot deeper, so I'm looking on him to correct me because I'm having too much fun up here, is that it's a couple of things. You can segment the data center market into sort of the kind of the core providing the cloud for everybody. We're not likely to see much of that here. What we are competing after is primarily research-based or low latency demand. What we're hearing for the first time ever and seeing in San Jose is that there is interest in building out at San Jose at PG&E's prices in a way we've never seen, partly because the capacity in Santa Clara remains constrained, but even with their Santa Clara's bump up from the LS power line, because they will get some of that capability, not all of it, we still have very, very strong market demand outside of Santa Clara. And as we've talked to them, I sort of stack rank, or I have them stack rank. I said, look, we got three things. You got certainty to knowing that you're going to get the electricity, speed on delivery of that interconnection, and cost. How do you stack rank those? And what they're telling me right now is for these low latency research uses, certainty, speed, cost. They'd like to have lower cost. Everybody would. They'd love to save tens of millions of dollars a year. But because of the demand around the research side to have that data center right there and to know that they're going to have that in Q2 of 2030, they're willing to deal with the cost at this level in a way that I've never seen in the market, as long as they have certainty and speed.
Go ahead, Phil.
No, just as an illustration, I had a colleague of mine at one of the large data center companies. Their Amazon rep is begging them to move their load up to Oregon where it's cheaper and they've got capacity. And they say, nope, we will pay an extraordinary premium for the short latency.
Yes.
And literally Amazon wants to sell them more capacity, but they can't because they don't have the physical presence here.
Right.
So
And
there is huge demand for it.
And if you look at the overall global data center market, a very small portion of it is low latency. in terms of what it really needs. But it's big enough to fill a couple of gigs of electricity. And the primary thing that low latency market is looking for is really smart people who know how to do AI. And a vastly disproportionate number of those people are in this valley. We've seen the tech industry flatten out globally over the last 20 years in terms of where talent is. Interestingly enough, the AI is the most spiked still. You can go to Singapore and you can get great coders. You can go to Chennai and you can get good coders. But in terms of AI capability, a lot of it in terms of the patent output is still right here in this valley. And so that might change in 5 years, but for this moment, that combination of this is what we want to do and it can only be the brains are here gives us a relative advantage.
I guess getting back to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having
Thank
too
you
much fun
very
with this.
much.
I've learned a lot on this in the last couple of years.
That's really helpful. To getting back to your letter, Ruth, shall we comment on any change, our ability to, as a commission, decide to support this letter and send it? Are there any if there are changes, what would those be? Anyone have any comments?
I just have one. First of all, I love the letter. I think it's great. I like the position. And I was going to ask you and our legal team, is the use of emotional words like reluctantly and exorbitant useful or hurtful for a memo like this? It's good. There's a couple emotional words packed in there, which I fully agree with, 100%. But I don't know if we say we reluctantly agree, if that hurts our bargaining position with them, or if we tell them their prices are too high, that hurts. I agree with it full force, but
City council.
okay, well, but it's still public record.
Yeah.
It's only as a city.
Right, but it's still
council.
public record, and I could just see it come up in a lawsuit later saying, well, they were never planning on playing fair with us. Look at the language in this memo.
Yeah, and that's the difference between my memo and yours, right? I mean, some of what I value, I guess, I'm sorry, I was just.
No.
No, that's why you're here.
Part of what I value about the role that you play is the role that activists play is that there are activists, there are leading edge activists, and there are bleeding edge activists, right? And the activists are like, okay, I'm trying to get something that kind of works. The leading edge activists, I'm really pushing. The bleeding edge activists are never satisfied. All three of those activists play a role in shifting the space of the dialogue over into an area that it wouldn't be otherwise. So I get to be a bureaucrat, and if I used to wear a tie, I tug it at this point. And so I write in the gray bureaucratic language, which is our norm. You are a commission which has an opinion. If that is your opinion, you get to express it.
Then if it's useful, then as it stands, it's fine with me.
I like the word reluctantly.
Sorry?
I like the word reluctantly.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if we were
Yeah.
supposed to be grayer or.
No, that's me. I get to be the gray bureaucrat. You get to have color.
I'm happy with it. I like it very much. Thank you very much.
Sorry. I'm not as enthused. Let's just start that way. So I like the idea of the city having alternative. I thought that was good negotiating. I thought when Zach and Lori explained that in a meeting in December of 2023, that clicked. PG&E wasn't serving us and we needed something. They were also supply chain limited and other issues which have changed some too. So on that aspect, I like that. I like the way we're going here, that we're not hell-bent to do it ourselves. In my professional life, I saw IOU utilities and I saw municipal utilities. I worked with them all, had friends on both sides. It's not cut and dried as to one's cheaper. It's not cut and dried as to what's better. The problem with the municipal ones is they could borrow money cheaper, but they had an awful lot of people at the table every time they wanted to do something, and they tended not to necessarily do things as fast or as right, and they were encumbered, I guess, by the process. So that it wasn't cut and dried, and for crying out loud, it's profit-driven activities feed me, they clothe me, they provide energy to me. I grew up, sort of thinking socialism and communism weren't real good because incentives and profit really doesn't work. And I'm an economist, so I like the idea of people working for themselves and helping each other as a consequence. I don't love PG&E per se, but things like this have an awful lot of moving parts. I have not been tracking this. As you all know, when I get involved, I do look at details and do try to do where I can contribute. I have very little to contribute to this, but I do have a lot of faith in what I've seen of the city staff, and it's sort of, and I appreciate that, so that's one thing. The other aspect is sort of the process of a two-page letter that was just sort of at this stage. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of opinions on this to begin with, but just because I don't like PG&E isn't enough to motivate me to sort of, it would take me time to digest this. It would take me time to think what I know about it. And, to do that here and now doesn't work for me. I'm just, that's me. But we've got umpteen other items on the agenda. We don't know how much this is going to influence the council anyway. So I'm not a fan of trying to tune this so we get more votes. You probably have enough votes for it now. So if you want to just, we'll see, because at least 4 of the people in this room were part of the founders of sort of initiating San Jose Clean Energy. So but I'm not one of them.
Are there any other comments? And I take your comments to heart. I guess before I make a comment, are there any other thoughts, either with what Victor is saying in sort of supporting that, supporting the letter, any changes, any other thoughts? All I can say is go ahead, Glenn. Were you going to say something? I think my only comment is that I personally never see that it's a problem to get another perspective out there. And that other perspective offers, even if it doesn't change the overall thinking, it may create nuance in how things are done. And it represents our concern. The letter to me represents our concern. In this letter, we talk a lot about supporting what the city's doing, but it does make the point that we are watching and we want to make sure that this is managed to the benefit of the community. And I think that, to me, there's therefore no reason not to deliver a letter like this with that kind of perspective. Anyway, Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about Vic's comment. You're not ready to support the letter, or actually the question is, what is your feeling about Kip's, the approach of the non-binding and then the binding?
It makes sense to me.
That makes sense.
But
the letter, so you're okay, but the letter basically
supports
says
that, but
okay,
it goes on to
support.
say, it's kind of strange, right? So I remember it from what I think here, but it sounded like it supported Kip's thing and then said, and on the top of that, we really want to make it known that there's we like the idea of a municipal utility. And that's what I heard from it. I mean, if it's Kip's memo, if we all agree with Kip's memo, why are we worrying about the letter? It's moving. If we have something new to introduce, what I heard was a preference for the city, not, I like it as a strategic alternative for negotiation. If the people, they're not hooking stuff up as a ratepayer in another part of the city, I'm not going to see any cheaper power. If we're sort of lining up of how to milk the data centers, that's
milking the data centers.
And I guess we should try to wrap this up because we've got so much more to do. But I'd like to ask Ruth, you were very much the instigator of the letter and done so much work in this regard. Do you have anything to offer about what Victor just mentioned about the sort of the letter, what's included in the letter in its entirety?
Yeah, so thanks, Victor. I know that, this letter came, very late. I
did read your 3 pages beforehand,
yeah.
but there was no ask.
Right, because I was waiting for the memo, and that's why we changed the date. I should have just left it at next week, because then we would have had the memo and we would have had more time. I would you know, I take what you're saying. I do have a big problem with PG&E's, you know, increases and, you know, I do have a problem with the amount of their profit. You know, like you said, you know, we do need profit, but, you know, their profit, you know, in, you know, various articles, it is excessive, but I think, you know, KIP has shown that, you know, for these, in order to do, move forward with the new transmission lines, they're saying this is the best way to go, and we're saying, okay, we reluctantly agree, but at the same time, we want them to make sure, we want to make known that we want him, or whoever follows him, to monitor this very, very closely, not to just say, oh, it's PG&E, let it go, and we just want to make our opinion known. And what I'd like, you know, I would like us to obviously send it. I you know, prepared this for you. But I don't know if we take a vote to approve it, if anybody has any revisions to it. I know that Victor doesn't agree with it, and you know, fine. But we do need to move on, so I don't know, we do.
So I guess I would like to pose the question, are there any changes that would like to be made? A really clear-cut question. Does anyone, I guess there's three options. We don't accept the letter in its entirety. We have some, people have some changes they'd like to bring forward to the commissioners, or we approve the letter as is. So.
Or if you want a few days. I mean,
Well,
is there
we
an
have to
option?
meet again. No,
We can
Because-
move to accept with edits would be what
Right.
my recommendation would be, if people want changes.
If they're
no,
changes.
but what I'm
The-
saying,
the way
he's
to
saying
move
in a
forward
few
after
days.
today.
But the edits have to happen here.
Yeah, the
Right,
edits have to happen
exactly.
here and
Yeah.
be discussed.
So those are my three choices. So, to that point, we don't have a motion on the floor yet. Are there any changes that anyone
Or
would
is
like to
there
make?
any changes, or does anybody think that we should not send it? And then we'll take a vote after that, I think.
Right, I
Yeah.
guess we just need
We need
discussion,
comments.
we need clarity about, if there's no, I don't see any hands raised, so is there a motion on the floor to do something? What would you, is there a motion to accept, a motion to deny, a motion to change? And if you have a motion to change, then you need to have a change that you'd like to offer forward.
Can I just have some clarity on the impact that this letter will make? Like, what's the difference between sending it and not sending it?
The impact of the letter?
Yeah.
I think it just represents the commission's in our entirety, generally speaking, our perspective on what we're expecting from the city in terms of their negotiations, the plan, the implementation, and an alternative to that to consider San Jose Power. Is that correct?
So it's like an acknowledgement of sorts of like, we see what you're doing.
It's
Pretty
right.
much.
It's our sentiment.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, if we stop after congratulating the city for, or the, you know, what they've put forward earlier, then that's good. It's when we go on to talk about sort of more, this commission wants to see greater attention given to creating a municipal utility. And that's the part that,
Do you
to me,
want to
is a
make
bigger
a
step.
motion
And
to
if we-
strike that?
Yeah, if we struck
Victor?
that aspects of it, and, you know, then I would be okay with it. I'm not sure what we're accomplishing, other than if we just said, we heard this presentation, we have confidence in the staff and the path they're taking. We're glad that they're keeping strategic alternatives, and then go on with the rest of the agenda. I would be
I've
happy
heard
to see that.
I've heard a preference. I would like to see a motion from the floor for some action, any motion, formal motion from the floor. Yeah, Ruth.
I move to submit the letter as it is.
Okay, there's a second. Okay, thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor, and depending on where we go, we might still be talking. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the letter as is. Could I see a raise of hands of ayes to accept the letter And nays? Okay, the motion passes. All right. Thank you, guys. That gives us a sense, Victor, I know it didn't go your way, but it
I'm not
tells us what we
surprised.
want.
Like I said, I wasn't gonna vote for it though.
But thank
because I don't believe it. I
Well,
don't like the way it's
yeah.
done.
Well, thank you, Victor, for sticking up for what you believe. Thank you.
And I know I'm out of order, but I want to say thank you. It really is delightful to be with you for my last official community meeting with the city of San Jose after, like I said, literally over 1,000 of them. I'm proud of what we do. I'm proud of what you do, and it matters. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, thank you guys for, it was an important discussion, and I know we took an awful long time for
And
that, but I just felt like
I
we
have
needed to.
one more question. I'd like to attend the meeting next Friday, and just, I wouldn't say anything other than what we had here, to reiterate briefly, because public comment was very short, on behalf of the commission. And so I'd like to do that, but I need permission from the commission, so.
You need what?
I need permission from the commission to speak, to make public comment next Friday.
From the commission. Yeah, you got that.
Thank you, I got
Permission
that.
from the commission.
Let's see, and how do we?
Speak
how
on
do-
behalf of the commission.
Speak on behalf of the commission.
So
Okay,
I
thank you.
guess would someone like to make a motion for the commission to approve Ruth's?
Well, we can see, go, because that, we appreciate a report back for what your
Yeah,
experience.
and then I would not say anything other than what's in the letter.
Okay,
I just kind of paraphrase it, of course.
is there a second?
A second.
And Ryan seconds. And all in favor of Ruth attending the commission and using the letter to discuss? Aye. All opposed?
No, I was on behalf, I was,
We
yes.
are unanimous decision. All right, well, thank you, Ruth. And so let us move on.
Dissenting.
Great discussion, by the way.
Dissenting opinion.
All right.
Could I be invited to the thing too?
San Jose, I guess I think we're now on the San Jose Clean Energy Project Workforce and Environmental Stewardship Project. I believe that's where we're at, and Phil is going to make a comment, present. And, but before we do that,
Thank you.
and gosh, I hope I have this. I've got so much paperwork here. We have a letter from the public that I want to read. And I think it should happen now rather than later for the sake of the commissioners, because you don't have any information about this letter that just came through at around 4 o'clock today. So I'm getting up from my chair for a reason. And that is because I'm going to read the letter, but I'm standing away from the chair. How far can I get? I'll try to go outside on the roof. Because I'm not representing these folks, I'm just reading the letter. And so don't think of me as the chair anymore, I'm just a member of the public. And I formally need to say that I'm reading this letter in my own personal capacity on behalf of the CCA workforce and the EJ Alliance. And to that point, let's see, I believe that I have, do you have the letter up by any chance could you bring that up on the screen, I guess? And I'll read this letter, I'll try to do this quickly. Again, as a member of the public. This was dated March 13th, 2025. And it was written to Chair Nelson and the Climate Advisory Commissioners of San Jose Clean Energy, San Jose City Hall, with our address. And it's related to item 7B, the San Jose Clean Energy Project Workforce and Environmental Stewardship Project Selection Criteria. And that's what we're discussing now, which we'll get into attachment Sandy. But, so back to the letter. Chair Nelson and Commissioners, we appreciate the collaboration between staff and stakeholders developing the San Jose Clean Energy Power Workforce and Environmental Stewardship Project Selection Criteria, and recognize the thoughtful work invested in this process. We also thank you for your leadership and efforts to advance San Jose's climate goals. While the draft reflects important priorities, focused refinements are necessary to ensure the policy fully aligns with best practices and maximizes benefits for workers, communities, and San Jose Clean Energy. Specifically, please see the attached red line version of the policy, we recently submitted to staff, which outlines key updates to fill existing gaps. And I do not have that with me. What I'll do is read the letter, and then if you want to bring that up after that might be helpful. We asked the commission to take the following, am I doing okay, Scott? So far, okay? We asked the commission to take the following steps before approval. Recommend revisions before approval, ensure key refinements are incorporated, including stronger local and targeted worker provisions, improved early phase project environmental siting and compliance with habitat conservation plans, enhanced end of project reporting to track outcomes, and best value procurement approach. Another point, support the red line changes, which I think you'll see in a minute. Endorse the updates we have provided to ensure the policy aligns with best practices and maximizes local benefits. And another point, strengthen oversight and accountability. Establish clear mechanisms for tracking implementation and compliance. Additionally, we encourage you to review our principles for integrating workforce and environmental justice selection criteria in clean energy project procurement document, which is attached. And of course, we don't really have time for that. So I'm not sure, Anne, how you want to handle that, since in the letter they did mention that. So I don't know how that would be resolved. But anyway, so they're suggesting if we wanted to look at that, we could. We appreciate your time and consideration and welcome the opportunity to further discuss these recommendations. Sincerely, Eric William, Tim Frank, and Leslie Austin, coordinators, CCA Workforce, and EJ Alliance. And then the two attachments, if you have them, you can bring them up quickly.
The first one.
And you might want to make that a little bigger if you can.
Sorry, this is our policy, is it not?
This is your,
This is redlined from.
Oh, I'm sorry,
from-
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
this is what?
So
Yeah,
this
if you
is the
scroll
red line
down, we'll
document.
see edits from the
Right.
This
stakeholder
is the
engagement.
draft San Jose policy.
So there we go. Thank you. That's perfect.
I see.
Can you,
I think the,
That's not showing the red line.
yeah, it's just a simple view.
it's on the left side.
Okay.
Enable.
Enable everything?
Yeah, go to enable,
Then we go to
review.
And
Oh, maybe it'll show now.
See if we go here.
I think all they did is put them on the
Oh,
left.
Go,
this part right here.
click review.
Some red
Just a second.
lines.
Are there? Oh,
And
okay.
do,
Sure. Drop down.
One-
Instead
one
of
right
simple
above?
markup.
This one?
Yeah,
Okay.
you want all
All
markup.
markup.
Yeah.
There.
Okay. And we'll go up engagement. There's nothing there. Right here.
Oh, there we go, maybe.
Can I see it?
Not black. All right, because it'll be a slight different color based on the
Yeah.
author that changed it. So everything black was
Is
our
prior.
original draft.
See, cities.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is a challenge, I
understand
told,
that. Let me go
yeah.
back. This pertains to like workforce used in power plant, power generators build out,
Correct.
for new build out. Okay,
Yes.
mostly.
Yes.
Would it help to go through the presentation and then look at the,
I think that maybe now that we've got an understanding of the general direction, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
yeah, the presentation is not super long, but we can make it as long as folks want.
Hey, Paul, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay, well, that comes up. My name's Paul Innamorato. I'm Deputy Director of Power Resources for San Jose Clean Energy, joined by Phil and Jean and Scott, also in San Jose Clean Energy. They have led a lot of the engagement with stakeholders and crafting of our draft. We'll just paraphrase as project selection criteria in conjunction with a lot of other folks at the city. So we'll just kind of go through this. You can stop and ask questions as we go along. I guess a little preamble. So Power Resources what are we? What do we do? We do procurement for electricity on behalf of San Jose Clean Energy. That takes the form of short-term contracts and long-term contracts. Long-term being 10 or more years. And we do these contracts as offtake agreements. So we are not developing or building the projects directly. We're contracting with a developer to do that, and then we take the output of the facilities once they come online. So that's a little bit of background. If you guys would like more, feel free to ask questions, and I may defer questions to the folks that worked on the criteria. Can you go to the first slide? So this has been over a year in the making. In February of 2024, we took a long-term agreement with council. It was a solar plus storage agreement. And at that session, we received some public comment around additional considerations we should make when evaluating what criteria to be evaluated when considering long-term offtake agreements. The public comment focused on labor points, workforce development, and they're kind of broken out here. We tried to bold the major takeaways from those. So after that public comment, council gave us direction to go out, discuss with stakeholders, and then bring that analysis back to council, bring our findings back to council. And what we're discussing today is the result of that analysis, what it took to get there, and some of the stakeholder engagement along the way. So the points that we were asked to do that analysis on really surrounded around projects and their compliance with prevailing wage, having a skilled and trained workforce, projects done under a multi-craft project labor agreement, and their demonstration of prevailing wage, and then for projects that are not under a multi-craft project labor agreement, that they're doing monthly reporting.
Yeah, for multi-craft, I presume this applies to contractors, that's really primarily, am I right about that?
Yeah, so this is between, and maybe John or Phil would like to comment on this. This is between the developer and the contractor they're hiring to build the project.
So if that's the case, because I sort of presume that was good. You mentioned about, validating, I forgot where the wording is, but about the monthly report data. How are you getting report data to validate that they're meeting the requirements? So how are you going to validate that data?
Yeah, there are representations that are made in the agreements that they will provide evidence of complying with these. I don't know, Phil, if you'd like to talk more about the conditions that are met to demonstrate compliance with these sorts of things. But I guess what I would say too is this is the evaluation of the selection of the project and the representation they're making at the time of the offer to San Jose Clean Energy.
Yeah, and another thing to be clear is this is what council told us to consider. In other words, they got this letter from labor representatives with, those ideas. And they said, look at those ideas, have conversations with stakeholders, and come back and tell us, what the result of those conversations are. I think in terms of that one, who would do the monthly reports, who would receive the monthly reports and verify them is one of the things that we would have to consider in deciding whether that approach made sense to us or something else.
Okay, I guess then my real point is anybody can write a report on anything. And so my biggest concern is if you're going to go that route, that you have a very secure approach to validating the data is correct.
And I really appreciate that comment because in our conversation with stakeholders, that was something that we discussed pretty intensely.
Okay.
That, if you look at what we came up with and what, for example, some of the other CCAs have done, you'll see that our proposal is in some ways, I would love to say, kind of simpler and more focused on the things that we heard really mattered to stakeholders and that we felt we could do, and it was appropriate for us to do.
And that's difficult to, on some things, to be able to manage at that level, and yet it's so important.
Exactly, but there's also, and we had this conversation with stakeholders, and I expect that we'll continue to have that conversation about whose role is it to do what, and what realistically is something that we are the best entities to evaluate and to not overstep. I mean, it sounds really good to have a bunch of boxes to check off, but will that really make a difference?
Exactly, right.
Two questions. So most of the long-term PPAs we've got so far don't have any of these. The city is not engaged in these sort of metrics. Is that correct?
Well,
This is new. This would all be new.
this would be new, but realistically, some of these things go into what's gonna ever get built.
Yes. So that was the second question is, doesn't the RPS already have some of requirements, have any of this built in already?
Well, there's permitting. And the truth is, in California, it's very hard to get a power plant permitted, for example, if it doesn't have a project labor agreement.
Right.
Because labor will come into the permitting process and be very forceful and persuasive.
That's a good point.
But
Glenn.
so that's California, right? And so some of the projects we look at are not in California. And so this is charting to sort of address some of that too.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry for interrupting, but please continue.
Great questions. Okay, so next slide, yeah. So this is just a little bit about our timeline. So our idea is to take the feedback that we've received. We had we issued the draft back out to stakeholders in February. We received comments early March, and we're here presenting for additional feedback, package that together for a final project selection criteria to present at an internal risk oversight committee, and then bring that to council, that finding to council sometime in early May. Next slide, please. So, as we showed on the first slide, the direction was really around labor and workforce development, and through the engagement, we really found a lot of overlap between stakeholders and their areas of interest, and the criteria expanded to include environmental stewardship, project location, and community engagement. Next slide, please. So these are a lot of the stakeholders that we met with. I think the letter today is represented on here as well. We looked at other CCA policies, even a neighboring CCA, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which I think in total makes up Santa Clara County. We worked with, obviously, Energy Department staff, City Attorney's Office, and Office of Quality Assurance. And then again, we issued the draft that was included in tonight's packet to those stakeholders. Next slide, please. So what are some of the things that we considered in developing the criteria? I know John spoke to some of them, but we also need to make sure we're respecting the legal boundaries with which we can apply things to contracts. San Jose Clean Energy is under a whole variety of state requirements to be compliant as a wholesale market participant, as a load-serving entity, so we can't prevent ourselves from meeting compliance obligations and managing our portfolio risks, those sorts of things. And then, so that sort of speaks to the relative weighting of the criteria. Next slide, please. So what was included you started to see some red lines to some of these sections. I don't know if as we go through these, you guys would like to talk about how important these were to stakeholders, but I do think we aligned we're pretty well aligned on the highest priorities. Project labor agreement was very important to stakeholders. That took a fair amount of work between staff and city attorney's office to get comfortable with language in the draft criteria. Working on exact percentages has been, we've received feedback on that. Location also was very important to stakeholders. There's as Zach mentioned, you can have an RPS compliant project that is outside of the state of California, and so aligning in-state projects, environmental stewardship, and community engagement. And so these criteria would receive the highest weighting as we're evaluating these projects.
The location is CAISO, within CAISO interconnect?
This is a little subtle. You could be within the state of California, but outside of the California ISO. And so if you think like LADWP or Sacramento, if you have something in their territory that's outside of California ISO, but within the state. And so
Actually, I was more interested in the opposite, outside of California, but having interconnect with CAISO.
Yes.
I mean, it's required, I guess, but
yeah,
you're still putting requirements on those.
Well,
on those sort of
I think
contracts.
I think there's like a bracket around CA and C. You have to have both conditions met. We're not talking about stuff outside of California, are we?
We are.
Yes.
yeah.
Or we are?
There's such a,
Well, yeah, outside of, you could be within California, sorry, and I think I'm just saying it the same way. You could be within California and outside of the California ISO, and you would not be the highest preference.
It's highly ranked.
Okay.
So the opposite.
And you could also be, I think, to your, you could be in Arizona and still within CAISO, and you would not be the highest preference.
So if we were building a wind farm or buying, we wanted the results from a wind farm that was really high quality wind and it was in Montana, heaven forbid. And does that mean that we're saying 30% of the workers on that wind farm should be from Santa Clara County, or is that what this is saying or not?
So, you know, one thing
that is
that
what it's saying.
sort of important.
It is what it's saying, okay.
But one thing that's important is, and that we've made very clear to stakeholders, and it's kind of like, regardless of what we do, is going to be like the next level of effort, is these are criteria in addition to other criteria. Our key criteria have always been economics, project viability, fit within our portfolio, those types of things. We will continue to evaluate projects on that basis, but in addition, we will consider these things.
If, in addition, then there may be situations where one is cheaper and the other one had more workers from Santa Clara County. Will this be a bright line that if it's over or under 30%, it's disqualified? Or would it be, well, that's 25% versus the other one's 22%, but it's cheaper for, how do you balance that? And
You know, Victor, it's one of the areas where we're asking the stakeholders to give us some grace. This is the first foray. We're identifying and trying to make simple enough that we really can dig into some of the criteria. We've asked that the actual weighting be something that we will develop on a case-by-case basis in any given solicitation. So in any given solicitation, when we issue the RFP, we always lay out what the criteria will be and what their weighting is. The stakeholders have appropriately asked us, so what's the weighting going to be? And we've said, we're working on that. We're going to have to work on that together. But we're not, as staff, at a place where we will recommend this is going to be our weighting in every single RFP.
How much does, I mean, this obviously impacts procurement. You have enough to do already. I mean, you have plenty to do. I mean, you have an IRP to sort of fulfill. You have all the RPS requirements, all this. You have to buy a lot of power, and you've had trouble finding people to do business with you in the past. Maybe that's changed. I'm sure it has some, but I mean, this isn't making it easier, is it? And do
Well,
we need more staff to, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that all of that is true. I'm happy to report that having been before you at the very beginning when we didn't have a credit rating and we didn't have a track record, we were in a much more difficult situation. We're now here 6 years later. We have a great credit rating and we have a track record and we have relationships. And so we're in a much better place. However, the things we need are things that everybody else needs. We all need cost-effective geothermal power. There isn't a lot of that. If somebody comes to me with a really good geothermal deal, I think I'll probably have to say, you know, this is really important to our portfolio.
Yeah.
If, you know, there's a lot of solar plus storage. You know, if somebody comes to me with 3 really good solar plus storage, I'll consider these things in choosing among them.
But how does that, you balance that with having to sort of go public or specify in advance what the weights are before you do the RFP, right? I mean.
Well, the other thing that is true and that we've discussed with stakeholders is some of these things truly go to some of the things that we've always considered. Folks who have good relationships with labor are more likely to get projects built on a timely basis. Folks who deal with environmental concerns upfront and in a responsible way are more likely to get their projects built. So there are some real synergies here. Folks who engage with the community are more likely to get their projects built promptly. So there's some synergies.
There's synergies, but that also implies that that's happening anyway.
Yeah. And, you know, Glenn, do you have a
I got
question?
another question. Is there unanimous agreement within San Jose Clean Energy about this policy update?
There is.
Unanimous, okay.
Well, I mean, so I'm not sure what you mean by that. We as staff have looked at it, have recommended, have discussed with management, and we're comfortable with what we are bringing before you because we feel that we've focused on things where we can truly say we can focus on those things. We can agree with stakeholders on those things. They make sense to us.
Okay.
We've resisted where we think, you know, I know stakeholders, you're coming from a good place, but we don't think it's the right time or place or form.
I would say from hearing the details that you provided in the comments that my personal perspective is that if you keep this, and I think you're going to, keep it very simple and not get into a lot of analytical kind of massaging of these criteria, that you can make it happen in an appropriate way. But once you cross that line into lots of data analysis and a lot of requirements additional to what you're already doing, that could be an excessive burden that you can't fulfill. And so anyway, that's my thinking, is that I see that there could be 2 paths. One is this sort of at this point in time anyway, for labor to keep it simple and then find your way to see if there are things where you're discovering the simplicity around analysis doesn't work and you need a slightly more complex approach. That's my thought.
I move that we accept the
Pardon?
draft. I move that we accept the draft recommendation on this report.
I
Is there a
second
second?
that.
All in favor of accepting the draft recommendations, say aye.
Can we discuss it first?
Oh, sure,
Yeah, sure.
please
Sure.
do.
Yeah. So,
That's why we have the motions.
I just want to make sure before we vote. Yeah, I just want to, we did receive a letter on this? The
Yeah.
letter that we showed at the beginning?
We read that
Yeah.
letter.
So is it possible for staff to consider those recommendations, or is this done?
Well, yeah, I think we are here to get feedback, and we are considering. I don't think that the feedback that we received today is any different than what we'd received on the 4th. So we have been considering it.
Okay.
I was just gonna, I'm sorry, just so where we are in the process, right? So this is the draft that went out to, so there was a lot of verbal discussion with stakeholders before we wrote things down and sent it out. They've marked it up. We have not, we've not formally begun to look at what can we take, what can we add to it. So today is the end of that gathering period. So we're gonna consider what they sent in as well as all the other red lines we've gotten.
Can we include that in the motion to consider
Yeah,
the
so that
feedback,
would
the
be-
letter that we received today?
Well, I would move that we don't include the information in the letter because I don't think it really is our area of expertise. I think we should allow
But
this
since-
organization to
Since
do
they're
it.
gonna do it, since they say they're gonna do it.
Sorry?
Yeah, you want to repeat that, Ruth?
Well, okay, since you said that you're gonna consider the letter that was received today in continuing?
The draft
No, I'm
recommendation
talking
is that
to-
we accept that we heard the report. if
I'll
I
second
understand you. I think Bill have already just.
Wait, I'm
No,
sorry, what
I'm
now?
asking Zach,
Sorry.
Yes, we're going to consider the
the letter
feedback
that
that
was
we,
received today, okay.
yes, along with
Okay.
all of the
And we
other.
could probably, from my perspective, whoever made the motion, Glenn, you could amend the motion to indicate that you want, an assurance that, even though it will happen, that the letter we received from the public will be added to the list of,
Considered,
yeah, if you want to do that.
Well,
But, go ahead.
I understood they were looking for our endorsement.
no, I'm
Yeah.
not endorsing it, I'm just saying that staff consider looking at it, like, or I don't know what the best way is, since they already said that they're going to.
I think they already are looking at it, is what I heard.
Okay.
I guess the reason I said that is that it because these folks spent a lot of time and effort, as maybe all the stakeholders have, but it provides an assurance, because they sent it to the commission. And it provides an assurance that we've looked at it, we've talked about it, and we've put a stamp on a request for their information to be considered, not approved.
Not approved, right,
But
no.
that, and I
Well,
just think
move that, I
that's
don't know what
an
the right
appropriate
word is.
thing to do for this group. Because if you looked at the letter, there's a lot of stakeholders tied to this letter. A
Yeah.
lot, there's, and they're not, there's Sierra Club, 350 Bay Area Action. I mean, and so this recognition of this letter simply stated that we want it to be considered we'll go back through this system to all these people that the commission at least looked and considered their letter.
Listen
That's
to
all.
it.
That's all. That's what
No,
Ruth is saying.
what I'm saying is,
Right.
I just, Zach, what would be the appropriate term to say that you guys look at that letter again, or whatever, I don't know how to say that.
Do you want to make how do we do a
An
motion for an
amendment, it would be an
adjustment?
amendment, I guess.
The amendment?
So
Do you want to make an
maybe,
amendment?
maybe it's two motions? I don't know.
No, it would just be
it's just
one.
one. Yeah, we accept the report, the report, but would we just say, please look at the letter? I don't know.
We requested that we presented the letter to the commission and the commission requests that this letter be part of the stakeholder evaluation for adjustments, any adjustments that may happen to the plan, to the labor plan.
Or maybe even shorter than that, just,
Well,
but
you
the
know,
first part you said, what was the first part you said?
Just say, consider the.
yeah, like,
Just
okay.
to look at it,
we're-
just to look at it.
It's you tacking on to what Glenn's motion was, and the commission read the letter and submitted it to be considered for any adjustments to the overall strategy of,
Project selection criteria?
yeah,
There's an acronym for it in the.
right. It's just acknowledgement.
Yeah,
That's
just
all,
an acknowledgement. We're not approving anything that they have in there. I just want to make sure that they.
And I don't see anything wrong with the commission making sure that Actera and the Sierra Club feel like we're working to consider their comments.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is there a second to the motion with amendment? Sure, yes, Manny, second. Is there any more discussion? If not, is there a vote to approve the motion with amendment? Aye. And any nays?
Be
Nay?
consistent here.
Okay, all right, the motion passes. Great, thank you guys very much. Lots of work on this, I think.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so where are we here? Are we on attachment D? No. This is sort of really all part and parcel of what we just talked about. Is there anyone that's going to discuss
C and D
attachment D?
C and D was the motion
Was together,
we just
yeah.
closed,
Yes, it was together, so we're really on motion. They didn't go through that with us, but we did redo it. So we're on attachment F. E, yes, we're on attachment E, thank you. And that is for the transportation department.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be back. Again, my name is Andrea Arjona. I work for DOT for the Planning, Policy, and Sustainability Department. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a low voice, sorry. So today we wanted to focus on a few key projects. I know before we had provided updates on kind of like a long range of projects, but we wanted to kind of like focus on 3 or 4 projects to give you a better sense of what we're working on and our progress. Next, please. So this is just a quick reminder of how DOT aligns, or DOT's work aligns with the city's general plan and climate smart plan, which is what you see at the top. And then right below, you see the citywide transportation plan that we call Move San Jose, is the city's access and mobility plan that guides everything else down the line to neighborhood plans. Next. So the Move San Jose is the sort of like the citywide transportation plan that translate like climate smart goals into actionable strategies. So that's why we have like a wider range of goals in that plan. And everything from, more affordable to sustainable transportation to things like livability and economic development in different areas. So we have a lot to balance and when we think about our project priorities in different districts. Next. And I would say that the key main strategies of Move San Jose are street projects, which basically refer to street, bikeway, pedestrian improvements. We have transit projects. Even though we don't run transit, we make investments to make transit faster, more amenable, or to create seamless transitions between other modes in transit. And then we have policies and programs that either help us shift behavior, so that are more sustainable modes of transportation that are appealing to other communities, or to kind of like facilitate other types of transportation projects. Next. So for street projects, one of the projects I wanted to highlight is the Better Bike Line 2025, which really aiming to create a network of bike lanes for all ages and abilities throughout the city so people could actually commute by bike. So right now we have 550 miles of usable network. Not all of it is segregated or separated by a barrier, but we're working on that. And the way that this works is we're taking advantage of our pavement maintenance program. And so every time we need to repave a street, we carve out space to put in a bike lane or other pedestrian amenities. And sometimes we need to kind of like stack that up with state and federal funding. Sometimes we don't have a lot of funding to do that. So we would do something like you see here in the picture, which is quick build. So we will kind of like mark the space, put these kind of bollards, and that allows us to kind of like evaluate how that's working on. And then we go and pursue more funding to make those changes more permanent, which is what you would hopefully see by the end of or mid-2026 on San Fernando Street, where we have a quick build and we're going to have a permanent infrastructure on that street pretty soon. Next. Another type of street projects that we are recently working on is the low carbon transportation materials program. So we're trying to also shift from typical asphalt to low carbon or low emission asphalt. And that is really challenging. We recently applied to a federal grant for a 6-year program. And what that will cover is not new infrastructure, it will cover the difference of purchasing those more sustainable materials. And it also involves training, all kinds of changes that need to be made for us to use those types of materials. Unfortunately, federal funding is kind of like on a hold right now for that and many other projects. But we will continue working on figuring out how we can get either additional funding or other ways to start doing this because we really think it's important. Yes.
Are the new types of asphalts as sturdy? I guess there's probably a better word.
Yes.
As the older type, so they do they age well.
They do. What my understanding of this is they do, but implementation of those steps of material requires changes in the way that we build things, and so it requires kind of like a shift, not just in the type of material we use, but also how we repave, how we build, and the other type of sort of like infrastructure that needs to go with that. So.
How much lower the emissions is?
That's part of that, for example, of that. Yeah, that's part of that grant. Assessing what would be the emissions reductions. That's part of that, for example, that grant that we applied to.
It's not in advance. I mean,
we
it's not
can
like
have
concrete,
Oh, yeah. We can have an estimate, but overall for these projects, I mean, it's not that we just go and, repave a highway. We also create planters sometimes, or we create other features around it that would add to sustainability or emission reduction. So it depends. It's project by project. I think the first time we envisioned this type of project, we thought about 6 areas, probably lower income communities, where we could implement more of this stuff, more greenery and things like that. But for now, we'll see how far we can go by ourselves. Next. In terms of transit, we've been working really closely with VTA to make improvements to make transit faster. One way we do that is we implement transit signal priorities in some intersections, so the buses don't have to wait for a longer time, and they kind of like travel times are more efficient. We also invest on bus amenities like raised bus stops. We put in shelters or real-time arrival displays, those kinds of things. So even though we don't run transit, we try to stack different kind of projects. So we may add to these also, for example, bike lanes or other pedestrian amenities to try to make that transition from, say, you're using a bike share to hopping on a bus or something like that. So it's an ongoing effort. It really requires close coordination with the Valley Transportation Authority. Next. In terms of policies and programs, I'm very excited to share that we were able to obtain a big data subscription that would allow us to better track transportation metrics and evaluate key performance indicators for our project, so how well we're doing. Next. And that is super important because what I didn't mention before is that the Move San Jose is a data-driven plan. So basically, this data is going to allow us to evaluate the different goals of the Move San Jose in different districts and kind of like simulate under different scenario, how our key performance indicators are working or not for different communities. So for example, in this example, you see that for District 5, clean air, transportation safety, and other goals are not faring that well. So this is our kind of like goal in that tool. This is like the city average. And these are, of course, the goals that are not doing very well. So this type of analytical tool or dashboard, if you may, what allows us to do is to kind of like plan different scenarios and figure out what type of projects we need to implement first in those areas to improve these very specific goals or very specific metrics.
So I was going to ask later on a question about priorities, but I think maybe this chart is a better place to ask. So you've got all these different programs that you're working on. And what I was going to ask is, so have you prioritized the programs? But maybe my better question is to say, for each area, is that how you prioritize the programs? Is by what is working and not working in each district? And if so, what does that mean for what you do with emphasizing certain programs over others?
Yes, correct. So this is kind of like a tool. It's not the only tool that we will use to decide what project should be prioritized, but it's a key tool because it takes real data. So that big data, for example, what's vehicles mile traveled in X corridor? We can know that for sure now. We can evaluate how a project is performing against, for example, things like, are there more fatalities or severe injuries in a corridor or things like that? And this is kind of like a simulation dashboard that allows us to kind of like put in, okay, if I put here protected intersections or pedestrian signal priority, I can start figuring out which kinds of projects or programs would have a greater effect on these very particular things that we have measured that are not doing very well. So that's why we need the data. We need the data to figure out how well we're doing in a specific district or even on a specific corridor. And then we kind of like put that against, different type of strategies. And then we can come up with a list of strategies for a whole district, if you may, but we can come up also with a list of projects. So our situation is we have hundreds, if not thousands of projects, and we need to prioritize them. And this is a good way for us to figure out, okay, which projects do we need to do first, and which districts we need to target first.
How many districts do you have
Oh my God.
that you analyze?
How many we were just redistricted? How many districts do you remember?
City council districts?
Council districts, yeah.
10.
Oh,
10,
council
10.
district
10.
basis, okay.
I have a question. You're collecting more data now. Do you have much evidence on how adding the bike lanes is affecting commuting by bicycle?
For example, these are the kinds of things that we would like to measure. So we would have, before this is just in the works, right? We will have a public facing tool by June. So we will be able to report, on this in more detail in our next update. But before we had this accessible for real, the way we did this is we would do a quick build, right? We would gather data. We would actually go in the field and gather data and say before and after, okay, at this time, at this day, we saw that there were more cyclists on these streets. But really not, without big data, really not able to say, well, people, from this district are traveling towards that district and the mode is bike, right? So with big data, we have a mode split analysis that we can do. X number of people are commuting by car, X number of people by bike, and so on and so forth.
I see lots of bike lanes coming into lots of places. I mean, we all do, right? And they're controversial with some circles. And the question is, what have been the benefits that we're getting from them? People would like to see that, I think.
Yeah, that's why we're having this tool become a public-facing tool as well, a version of this, so people start understanding why bike lanes would be a good alternative for a specific area. It may be that there's a lot of pollution, that there's a need, or whatever we can showcase to the public.
The stories I hear, we'd just like to see somebody riding on them.
Yeah, for sure.
So are you able to measure like the impact of electric bikes? Is that increasing? Do you see more bikes because of that? Because I would think, and would there be, a reason for providing incentives for people to get electric bikes?
Yeah, absolutely. So for that, we know anecdotally that communities love e-bikes. When we introduce e-bikes through our bike share system that is managed by Lyft through MTC, there was an immediate, uptake in bike usage for the e-bikes. I think, there was a state incentive for purchasing e-bikes that was open on a day, at 10 a.m. in the morning, for example, and the budget was gone by the afternoon. It was like super oversubscribed.
Am I too late? I just bought my bike last week. Sorry.
So the majority of transportation projects like this really rely on state and federal funding. So that's a key thing. I think maybe San Jose Clean Energy is thinking about an e-bike incentive later on, not for this current work plan, but maybe later on that's something.
Well, it's obvious it worked, because a lot of people were incentivized to
And
get bikes.
this was my last kind of like project spotlight tonight, but if this is of interest, we can share more. You will see on our Climate Smart T&E presentation, there's going to be more updates about different projects. We just don't have a lot to, I think, report, and you wanted to overwhelm also with so many projects. You wanted to ask something? Sorry. So next update, we can provide updates on bike share, on EV charging. We're also working on a pilot for curbside management. So that's kind of like managing parking on the curbside and other things. So those kinds of things we can, and of course an update on this for next update. But if you have like a project that you would like us to focus on for next update, we're happy to provide information on that. I think that's it.
Is that, any questions? Any additional questions?
So with the metrics and mission and everything, how are you having to change that in order to receive grant funding from federal sources?
From federal sources, there's not much that we can change. So for example, we were awarded $12 million from the CFI program to install public EV chargers in the city. And that is on hold, and there is no opening right now to release that funding.
Otherwise gone.
For the moment, we probably need to wait 4 years.
Do you guys have regular communication with the community bike groups?
Yes, absolutely. We participate actively in the bike coalition, and we have, committee meetings, and yes, absolutely. So San Jose Department of Transportation staff are really active in the kind of like bike advocacy community for sure.
If there aren't any other questions, staff did offer suggested motion language for a motion. If you look at your agenda, I think it's in there.
Yeah.
If anyone,
Draft recommendation.
yeah, if anyone would like to make a motion to that effect or another motion. It's would be transportation semi-annual update. And I'll just read it. It says the Climate Advisory Commission accepts staff's transportation semi-annual update as presented at the March 13th, 2025 special session. Yeah.
Accept.
The motion language?
Yes, the
Okay,
motion.
is there a second to that motion? Victor, yeah. And so are there any other questions or thoughts prior to voting on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye. And
Wow.
amazing.
Come around.
And I'll say anyone with an A on this, I think it passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your
Disappointed. We're disappointed.
presentation. You have a lot of work ahead of you. Oh, huge. Okay, we are.
Just a quick time check, how long?
We
do
are,
have
do-
left?
yeah, we're,
Overtime.
we're at 9:03, which we can speed through, I think, get done before
Yeah.
9:30.
I think I'm the last main presentation here, and then it's just discussing the next agenda. So I can try to go through this as quickly as possible, but I'll just frame it up really quickly. This is the presentation that the Climate Smart team, as well as DOT and energy representatives, will be giving to the Transportation Environment Committee coming up. So this is our semi-annual update. Julie came and presented on this last year, so we do this update twice a year. And then based on commission feedback, there's actually a second attachment that is a summary document that we put together based on the city's priority areas. And we would love commission feedback on that because right now that is still in the draft stage. And the goal would be to have that translated into other languages and making it publicly available as a summary for the Climate Smart update. So yeah, I'll try to go through this presentation as quickly as possible so that we can get to the discussion. Basically what we're going to do is give a little background, like what is Climate Smart, give some of the updates in the core areas, and then a little bit of like a looking forward, what's going to be in the next reporting period. So just a little background, I'm sure you're all familiar. Climate Smart San Jose approved in 2018, and then the pathway to carbon neutrality was passed in 2021. 2022 actually was approved. And so that focuses our core areas on zero emission vehicles, reducing vehicle miles traveled by 20%, switching our appliances from fossil fuels to electric, and carbon neutral electricity. So this update really focuses on those four core areas. And then ESD staff lead, facilitate, and or support climate mitigation initiatives across departments citywide. So this is a little summary of our funding sources this is to date for fiscal year 24-25. The city has received over $23 million in total funding for climate smart initiatives pending execution in this reporting period, with over $1.1 million in fiscal year 24-25 so far. The total funding awarded from granting agencies thus far in fiscal year 24-25 includes support for initiatives to further transit station access and circulation planning, the adoption and implementation of the city's transit-oriented communities policy, East San Jose public electric vehicle charging infrastructure, EV charging ports design and construction, and extreme heat resiliency in the community. The Departments of Energy, Environmental Services, and Transportation are recognizing and implementing all of the grants. City staff have also directly applied for an additional $67.27 million in external funding in this reporting period, with several award negotiations or notices pending. And then we are planning to submit applications for over $8.1 million in funding for climate smart initiatives in the next reporting period, which I think is like September.
And how many, just real quickly, is local, state versus federal?
I don't have a summary of that offhand because that does incorporate energy and DOT initiatives. I would say, though, that it's heavily federal and state funding. I would say probably most of that is going to be federal and state. And sometimes even the state funding is really coming from federal but being dispersed through the state. So I would say a lot of it is really pending at this point and to be determined. I think that's everything for funding. So a little bit on community outreach and engagement. Some highlights that we've done in this reporting period are launching our San Jose Climate Chronicles. We launched this new quarterly newsletter in October 2024 to engage residents in climate action, and we do make it available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Hopefully all of you have subscribed to that. We are always also looking for spotlights in that, so if you ever have suggestions on things that we can feature or maybe articles you'd be interested in learning more, that's definitely helpful information for us too.
How big is the listserv?
I don't know offhand, but I think the last I heard was around like 250 email addresses, something like that.
That's all?
Yeah, I mean, people have to opt in and it's climate smart specific. So it's not like an ESD general listserv, and we don't like automatically reach out to like ratepayers or anything like that, but we are actively trying to promote it in several areas to try to get that.
Could you send us
up.
the link so that we can send it on to others?
Yeah, definitely. Let me find my pen.
It could be in our newsletter for one thing, right? You know.
And I think we have an outreach and advocacy strategy on the work plan for the next meeting. So I could bring you more up-to-date numbers, and that could be something we could discuss too, is how to get more people to sign up.
Get on villages, I could get it in the villages newspaper.
Yeah.
Exactly, perfect. And then we also had a sponsored electric home tour, and over 730 people toured homes. 31% of attendees expressed high interest in adopting heat pump HVAC systems and heat pump water heaters within the next 3 years. And then there were also equitable mobility initiatives, and those were supporting low-income transit solutions, including 1.3 million mobility wallet pilot and a 3.5 million microtransit grant. The next few slides, full disclosure, are actually DOT and energy slides. So I'm reading off of other people's notes. And if you have questions on these, I can either pass it to Zach or we can follow up if there's anything from DOT that we can't answer here. So this is a DOT slide, and in this reporting period, they launched the East San Jose Equity Mobility Project, including a $1.3 million mobility wallet pilot. They added 7.4 miles of new bikeways, upgraded 32.8 miles, and the total network is now 550 miles. They're working with Lyft and MTC to deploy 500 new e-bikes, 32 new stations, and promote ridership in East San Jose. They launched a curb management pilot to digitize curb data and track vehicle activity and uses. And they acquired a data subscription to improve vehicle miles traveled tracking, monitor key metrics, and support data-driven climate smart strategies. And that's what Andrea talked about.
Sorry, I missed the wallet pilot is funding for e-bikes or what was that?
That one, honestly, I'm not familiar with the mobility wallet pilot, but I think that I assume that it is tied to that. I could ask Andrea that, sorry.
Scooters.
And then this is an energy department slide. So for zero emission vehicles, they have the California EV Infrastructure Project, and they installed 197 level 2 and 32 direct current fast chargers. And all projects will be installed by the end of 2025. They also have a multifamily EV charger incentive pilot with 11 properties reserved for funds for 78 ports. Also a fast charging hubs pilot with 4 to 7 hubs of 10 ports each at libraries and community centers.
How do you define multifamily? Does that include condos? Is it just apartments?
And generally, at least from ESD's perspective, I'm assuming, Zach, it's the same. It's based on the number of units per area. Like, I think basically single family is like one single housing unit, or what's it called when there's two houses on a single floor? Duplex. But basically anything 5 dwelling units and above, I think, is defined as multifamily. Is that correct? So something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it for zero emission vehicles. 100% carbon neutral power. Default green source service is 62% renewable. They have approximately 1,600 customers who upgraded to Total Green, which is 100% renewable. They have contracted for over 1 gigawatt of new renewable energy and reliability resources, and they are on track to provide 100% carbon neutral electricity by 2030. And then next are just some highlights of building electrification in the last reporting period. So I think Kate talked a lot about these when they did their programs roadmap, I think in the January meeting, so I won't spend too much time on
Sorry, can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
So carbon, On track for 100% carbon neutral. Okay.
You know, it's the 2030 goal, so that's our piece of it.
Okay.
So do we have a latest number on what percent we're at currently? That's not the 62, right?
This, no, the 62, what did I say,
Percent of
Council?
customers.
93%, I think, is the mix supposed to be. I mean, it fluctuates a little bit depending on the water and there's a nuclear run and all that stuff, but this year, 2025 is supposed to be 93%.
So it's 62, I thought we were at 60, but it's now 62.
What we approved, what we brought here was 62.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is that the one we?
This
Yeah,
one's
I
the
think
one
we
after.
covered
This
that
one
one.
covered that one. She talked about that. And this one.
Electrification, let me see, is this, okay. Do I have anything? I think this is a different slide.
Okay, is it this one looking at?
Yeah, actually, can you go back one? Okay, yeah, that one.
This one?
Yes, that one. So Electric Homes San Jose funding covered 162 total project measures, including 65 heat pump HVAC systems and 9 heat pump water heaters. Out of the 56 project sites, 53 were single-family households and 3 were multifamily properties. And then we also have our Beyond Benchmarking program, and for that 380 out of 1,790 covered buildings are in compliance with our Beyond Benchmarking requirements. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Beyond Benchmarking or if you want a little summary of what that involves. Okay, so every year we have a benchmarking requirement. So we have a building performance ordinance, and that requires all buildings over 20,000 square feet to report their energy and water usage for the previous year. That is basically just for reporting, just sort of a data gathering thing, but the idea is to promote water and electricity efficiency. So along with that, we have our Beyond Benchmarking program, which is an every 5 years requirement. It's like a rotating cycle. So last year was the first year that we had people reporting for Beyond Benchmarking, and that was only large buildings, 50,000 square feet and above. This last year was the first year that we started incorporating 20,000 to 50,000 square foot buildings that were also reporting, and we basically have a certain portion of the total building stock in San Jose that reports every year, and after 5 years, all of the buildings covered by the ordinance will have reported, and then it starts over again, and we go through a 5-year cycle.
Does this reporting require gas reporting also?
So it's electricity and water use that they're
Yes.
reporting on. No, it's just about building efficiency standards. So yeah, it's just energy, it's just electricity and water for this. Mm-hmm.
Don't you want to see gas? Don't you want to track gas?
Yeah, that's, so separately, we have building electrification work that we do and prioritize, but this is really about energy efficiency instead of electrification. But in the Beyond Benchmarking program, there are energy reporting requirements where they have to meet either the performance or oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name of the other pathway. There's basically 2 pathways. You either perform to a certain level where you are 25% the mean of like buildings. So like all multifamily buildings are grouped together, office buildings, strip malls, things like that. So if your water use and your energy use is 25% below the mean, then you have qualified, you're in compliance in the performance pathway. Separately, we have the improvement pathway is the other one, and that you either get an energy or a water audit, which basically incentivizes electrification as well as other standards, which are like LED lighting, things that turn lights off automatically when buildings are not in use, things like that. So you have to install a certain number of measures. An audit is one way, or you have to install a certain number of measures that improve efficiency within your building. So that is one way that it does actually promote electrification of buildings, because it actually improves the efficiency of the buildings by electrifying. Smart thermostats are another way. Heat pump HVACs are also generally recommended in audits and things like that. So every 5 years, buildings come up for compliance with that. We do see many buildings doing an audit for the first step, which is not surprising, but the idea is that hopefully in future years, they'll start to actually implement some of the energy efficiency upgrades that are recommended in those.
I don't quite understand my guess. Maybe I didn't understand something. But I guess these are existing old buildings included, right?
Yeah, it's anything 20,000 square feet and above.
Don't quite understand why gas is not there, but I can take that.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure, and actually we can, something that we've considered is bringing actually the BPO team here to report on that and to, provide more information on the program as well. And then we can go to the next slide, which is just looking ahead. In the next reporting period, which is March through August, and these are some of the highlights of what we're hoping to complete in the next reporting period. Some of the items on here are offering incentives for home battery storage, completing a fleet electrification master plan, finalizing climate smart zero waste plan, releasing the climate adaptation and resilience plan draft, and completing the city's 2023 greenhouse gas inventory. And then also we have some anticipated council items, which includes the workforce development programs, the San Jose Clean Energy Workforce Development Programs, along with the Climate Smart Plan administrative draft. I think that's it for this. And then separately, if we want to bring up the one-page document. Yeah, so there's not too much on the front, but this is most of the summaries. So if there's any feedback on the presentation or on this handout that we will, once this is finalized, we plan to translate this into Vietnamese, Spanish, and Mandarin.
I'm running into Turkish now.
When do you think, just sort of a rough date for finalization, you think?
For this, so it's currently being reviewed by the Environmental Services Director. And so pending feedback from the commission, it would basically be finalized and ready for translation as soon as we receive her approval.
Okay, thanks. Gosh, are there any questions? Just lots of work. Lots going on. So did you have also a suggested motion language for this?
Yeah.
And that is similar. It's the Climate Advisory Commission accepts staff's Climate Smart semi-annual update as presented at the March 13th, 2025 special session. Are there any other questions? If not, is there a motion?
Can we add request feedback on why gas isn't included?
Any suggestion?
I moved to modify the
Okay.
thing to add, to request feedback why gas isn't included.
I'd like to discuss that.
Am I?
I second his
You're not gonna vote against it?
It's the suggested motion language with an addition of the upcoming update would add the gas. You want to repeat that again?
Just
The
an
gas.
explanation of why gas is not included in
Yeah.
the
So
draft.
in the presentation to the Transportation and Environment Committee, or like separately when we bring the building performance ordinance to discuss here?
Sorry, in the.
So right now,
Just to.
right now, we're approving this presentation,
Yeah, I
the
understand. We
update that we're
approved it.
giving
We approved it.
council.
It's the previous one.
Or if
It's
we
too late.
wanted
That
to
trade is-
separately have a discussion about the building performance ordinance and a bit more in-depth discussion about what it covers and why.
Yes. Is that a valid answer? Yes.
So I guess it would be great if, when you're able to do that fairly soon,
Yeah.
bring that to us at any meeting as just a subject of
Yeah.
discussion.
So, I
Why would we
mean,
do that without a motion?
sorry, the wording is we accept the update and also request just some follow-up on this question about gas.
Okay, so any discussion? If not, raise of hands to approve the motion with the motion with the amended request. Say aye, and opposed? No opposition? It passes unanimously, and we are close to wrapping up this lengthy meeting. All right, thank you, guys. That was a lot of work, and you're doing a lot of work, yikes. Are there any potential agenda items for the next meeting that anybody would like to put forward?
I can give you a quick update on what's on the work plan for
Okay.
the next meeting, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the next meeting, we will have an update on the climate adaptation and resiliency plan. So Michael Gonzalez will be here to do that. We'll also have the outreach and advocacy strategy that I mentioned earlier. And then we'll also be discussing the commission work plan for the next year. The next meeting will conclude our first full year. We'll also have the annual report for the last year. And then we'll also need to set the schedule for the next year, because the next meeting is the last date that we have set as well.
And May 15th is the meeting.
Yes.
All right.
I will double check, but I'm
That's what it
90% sure
says
that's
here.
correct.
Tracy,
Yes.
do you have anything? I know that you have particular things you'd like to discuss. Are you okay with, no additions? Okay, then I think that sounds good. And the next regular meeting is scheduled for May 15th. And any other announcements? Anything just general that you want to discuss?
I have a couple announcements. We, San Jose Clean Energy, we're putting on a big event. And you guys are gonna be there too, I think, right? On the 12th, April 12th, at the Earthquake Stadium in partnership with the Earthquakes, where it's a big ride and drive, EV ride and drive event. Plus, we're having like a electrification kind of home expo piece to it as well. So it's our big spring event, our big Earth Month event. So we'll get a flyer and a save the date to you. And really your help in promoting it to your networks, that'd be great.
Great, okay.
That's
You putting
one.
out a flyer or something?
Yes,
that
yeah,
can-
we'll circulate around. Sorry, I didn't think to bring
Super.
that.
And you got another one
And-
too?
And if you've got some social media language you want to drop on us to throw in our networks.
Yes, all of that.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, good idea.
Like we can lob them off to all of our social networks.
Right.
Yesterday, some of you may have seen the mayor's 35-page budget message, which had a lot of rich stuff in it. But the reason I bring it up most particularly is that in there he mentioned, and so now it's out. But exciting news that Climate Smart is moving from ESD to energy. So really excited about that we can work yet more closely, collaborate, find synergies, all that good stuff.
Interesting.
ESD is about 650 people, 8 of whom work in Climate Smart, right? So whereas we are about 60. And so, I think there's just a lot closer alignment perhaps in the, maybe it's a more natural fit. So that's coming. And that'll be as part of the next fiscal year. And so in terms of what days moving and all that good stuff, but over the summer.
Fantastic. That's great. That's great.
That's all.
Fantastic. That's all good news. Any other announcements? Yeah, Bill.
As of next Tuesday, I will be 100% electric. We're having our HVAC system put in on Tuesday and we're gonna turn off the gas.
Yay, right.
Are you getting an eco-home rebate as part of that?
That's a good question. I know we're gonna get $2,500 from San Jose Clean Energy, but.
That's the
But once we
eco-home,
get-
that's how we brand it.
Oh,
That's
okay,
what
yes.
eco-home,
Yes,
Great.
definitely.
54.
Thank you. I'm sorry?
You're one of the 54
Yeah,
up
you'll be
there.
in the next reporting period.
Oh.
And
What is
Glenn,
Good job.
Glenn,
Been a long
I
time
just
coming.
wanted to, I looked up the building performance ordinance and I misspoke. It does cover gas. That is reported under there.
Thanks. Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right, well,
Sure you would've
I
gotten
think
your phone if you didn't.
with all of this that we've talked about today, I guess there's no further discussion. The meeting's adjourned.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.